My name's Stuart, and in my spare time, I like to learn languages and explore the great outdoors.
All right, Stuart, welcome to the Well of Wellbeing. It's lovely to have you.
Good to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, finally, we get you.
Took a wee while, but we got there.
We got there, yes. So, Stuart, tell us a bit about yourself. I know you love to learn languages, but dive deep. Are there any specific languages?
There's a couple of languages. I learned Spanish in high school, so I've been trying to practice and improve on that. I recently started learning Gaelic, like Scottish Gaelic, which is good fun. Just a little bit about me. I'm a Christian. I'm part of the church, Destiny Church, in Glasgow. I help out with some of the pastoral stuff there. I lead a growth group specifically for guys, and thoroughly enjoying that and all that God's doing through that. And I'm also a PhD student at the University of Glasgow studying aerospace robotics.
Aerospace robotics, wow. Sounds very sciencey.
Yeah, it is. I love it for that. It's the way I'm wired. I love maths. I love physics. It works for me. So I'm very grateful to be where I am.
Fantastic. So I've got a few questions for you before we go into our little discussion.
Sure thing.
One answer.
Mm-hmm.
So if you were to go on a holiday, would you
Right.
pick a sunny destination or a cold destination? Would you go to the North Pole? Would you go to South Africa?
Oh. I mean, I've been to South Africa. It's gorgeous, but I'd have to pick a cold destination. Specifically, I'd love to go to Iceland. I would absolutely love to go and visit Iceland. It's on my list of places to go and see. I'm built for the cold. I think I go to warm places and I struggle, but I'm okay in the cold weather.
Oh my goodness, that's hilarious. So that gives me a bit of insight into my next question. My next question is, you're going away on a holiday. Are you going hill walking or are you going salsa dancing?
Oh, I will hill walking, absolutely. I wouldn't say no to going dancing, but I do quite enjoy it. Mainly Kaylee dancing, if I'm perfectly honest, but I love being out in the hills. That's where I feel I'm most at ease out there.
Okay. Well, but you speak Spanish. How are you not going to go salsa dancing?
I didn't learn salsa dancing in my Spanish classes. It was kind of more focused around the language, unfortunately, as fun as that would have been.
Got you. And then lastly, you are on a stranded island. You need to pack a bag. Three items. What are you taking with you? 3 items. 3.
Okay. Right. I'm going to do the good Christian thing and say a Bible, first of all. Number 1.
No, you can't say that, but the Bible is in here, so you can't say
Okay, so I'm not allowed the Bible. Okay. Or we just assume that I've memorized the Bible already. Okay, so I would definitely say you'd want a water container, like a water bottle or something to put water in. I'm a bit of a survival nerd, so I have actually thought about this. I would bring probably a knife, either a knife or an axe.
Okay.
And probably something to make fire with, like flint steel, matches, something along those lines. Something to get a fire going.
Okay.
Easier than using the harder methods of a bit of string and some wood. So I think those are the 3 survival things I would take.
To be honest, I don't think that was a good question for you because you're kind of like a sciencey outdoor person.
I am. Yeah. You asked me a survival question. That's.
Wait. Okay, so let's go into singleness. Stuart, why do you think you are single? It's not that singleness is a bad thing. It could be you decided to bench yourself. It could be for a million reasons. Why do you think you are single at the moment?
I think this is an interesting question. As you say, singleness is not a negative thing at all, and I think it's something that in the church we're trying to rectify among singles. It's not a bad thing. It's not something you need to be afraid of. But I think actually more than that, it's actually the default position of humans. Like if you think about it, we're born romantically unattached. We grow up to a certain stage before we get married and become one flesh with someone. And then if you look in the Bible, Jesus says in eternity after the resurrection, no one will be married. No one will be married or given in marriage, it says. So actually there's an element of which it's kind of the default for humans. We're in eternity, the vast majority of our time spent with God is not going to be spent married or in this state of marriage. So I think being single sometimes we can try and think of it's just the stage before the real stuff happens in marriage, and that's not the case at all. So I think the reason for me being single is because, the Bible says there's a time for everything. Everything happens in its season. And I just don't think that my time to get married has happened yet. I personally don't feel like I'm one of those people who are called to stay single.
Okay.
But, so I think it's a case of working with God to make sure that it happens at the right moment.
At the right moment. So you're saying you're basically just flowing with God for the season.
I think my relationship with God needs to take a higher priority than forcing a romantic relationship, if that makes sense.
Forcing a romantic relationship. Oh.
Yeah, like I don't want to be so scared about being single that I'm like, I need to try and make something happen, because I've tried that before. It doesn't work. So my relationship with God needs to come first.
Got you. Good answer there. Good answer, Stuart.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
So let's just dive straight into what you think qualities in a female would be good for you on a personal level. What qualities? There's general qualities. She needs to be Christian. She needs to be, but on a personal level, what qualities would you look for?
Well, I mean, so many people have this idea of like a list of like, this is all the things I would like in a spouse, and I think for Christians, the one thing that needs to be top of the list is she does need to be Christian. This idea of being unequally yoked. If we kind of assume that's a baseline, and I used to, when I was younger, I used to think that I was super mature because I wasn't looking for the same things that a lot of other boys my age, they were all talking about physical, she needs to be attractive characteristics. And I was like, no, I need to get along with her. She needs to be kind. I was looking slightly deeper. But I think I've since realized that I wasn't going deep enough. Like, I think I was still looking at personality, whereas it needs to, I think, drop a little deeper into like character. Like, what are her values? What are the things that she's standing on? What is she building towards? Because if those things don't line up, it's not going to work out. So, there needs to be a certain level of, she has a certain amount of integrity. She's able to work towards something. She knows that a relationship is something that you build. It's not something that just happens magically overnight. There's work put into it. So I think it's almost a character level thing.
Okay.
But I also think that as a question, we're so quick to ask the question of what do I want from a spouse, but I think sometimes the more important and valuable question is, what kind of spouse do I want to be? Like, what kind of husband do I want to be? Because you come to the end of that question and suddenly you have, right, these are the character traits of a good husband in my eyes. This is who I want to be. How do I match it? Like, not wanting to condemn ourselves, but going, okay, where are the areas that I could use some work? And you can do something with that. Whereas there's also an element of sometimes humans don't know what they need or what they want, really. Like, so we have this list.
That's true.
And we're like, okay, great, you have a list. You're probably not going to have a spouse that's like that at all. I've seen so many people have like, this is what I want, and who they marry is totally different to that. So I like the question of what kind of husband do I want to be better than what kind of wife do I want, as much as it's an important question.
But you're not getting off scot easy. You need to give me.
Nope.
No.
Okay.
Why not just marry that? You tell me what you're looking for and then what you want to bring to the table, or what you're looking for because of what you're trying to become. Does that make sense?
So I think they're actually almost related. So having a good idea of what I want to become gives me a good idea of what
you're looking. Yeah. What would be?
What there would need to be in order to make that work. So, obviously on a Christian level, deeply committed in her faith, there would need to be a level of, I guess, strength in terms of she knows where she's going, but still open to flexibility with God on, it's God's word on it. I love, you hear about people who bring out the best in others, and that to me is an incredible quality, someone who I can bring the best out of and she brings the best out of me. And I guess I would also say someone who, there does need to be an element of we can have fun. Like, as much as I said personality is not the be all and end all, like if we don't get along, like it's just, it's not going to work. There does need to be an element of she can have a laugh, I can have a laugh with her. There's an element of also trust.
Okay.
So if I can trust her with the parts of me I'm maybe not proud of myself, and she can trust me with the same, that's hugely important. So she needs to be trustworthy in the same way as I do.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, does that answer the question? I don't know if I was being too vague.
Answers there, Stuart. Good answers. Now I'm doing this thing where I'm bringing back some information from all interviews to see what your thoughts are on them. So one of the feedbacks that we got from qualities people are looking for, a recurring thing among us Christians, has to be serving in church. And a Christian girl said to me, why is that such an important thing? Why I could be a doctor who goes away once a year to volunteer in a mission trip. I don't exactly serve in my church. That could be my area of serving the kingdom. Why is this serving in church thing so important? So I said I'd ask a guy about this. Is that an important thing to the church to be serving in church? If so, why? If not, how do you gauge that commitment to God?
A good question. I would say initially yes, because I think there is basically when we talk about the verse that says don't be unequally yoked, it's often used in the context of Christians marrying non-Christians, and that doesn't work. We know that. I think that's, unless you want to have that discussion, I would agree that doesn't necessarily work. I think there's also an element of, if I'm committed to the church to a certain level and I'm spending a certain amount of time serving, as I believe I'm called to, and she doesn't feel that like the same commitment to service, I think certainly from what I've seen in other relationships, a resentment, the chance for resentment to occur there is really quite significant. So she's going to resent the time I'm spending serving if I'm, she's only serving, going away on missions once a year, whereas I'm there diligently every single Sunday, from first thing in the morning and doing my thing, and or like spending evenings going and helping disciple people. Like, I think there's an element to which where if she doesn't get that, she's going to resent it, and that's not a healthy place to be, I don't think. So for me, it would take a significant, there would need to be I would say a unique scenario for it to be okay, where I'm actually, no, she doesn't serve in the same way or the same capacity as I do in terms of commitment level, but that's okay. That would be a significant, I'd need to spend time with God praying and thinking on that one. For me, I think the easiest is definitely she loves God and she loves to serve in his church and exactly the same heart I do for it. Great, that's not going to be a stumbling block for us. That would be my answer to that one.
That's interesting. So what you're saying is that your potential love interest has to be on par with your level of commitment.
I would say so, because I think what happens otherwise is one person starts dragging the other, and the person being dragged resents it, and the person doing the dragging is frustrated, and it just doesn't match up. And I've seen relationships like that. I've been in relationships like that. It needs to match, and if it matches, then you guys are going to be running in step. And there'll be periods where you have to help each other along and encourage one another, but if you're starting off running at the different paces, I feel like that's just a recipe for disaster, frankly.
So that means you wouldn't really, what if the person is new in faith? There's all these nuances. If the person is new in faith, is on a trajectory of growth, how are you going to?
I think it would entirely depend. I think a new Christian already has so much to discover in terms of their walk with God, that actually a relationship in that moment, unless for a very specific person, and God's absolutely saying go, I think there's probably better focus been spent for that new Christian on their new relationship with God and getting that good. And I think, again, there would just be a difference in faith simply because I've been walking with God for X amount of years and learning to use my faith, and they haven't quite been on that journey yet. So that would, I feel, be a difference, that unless I felt like, man, God, you're just like she's catching up, and because you're just helping her in that way. I would be very hesitant to look at that, really. Not out of anything, like it wouldn't be a rule, it would just be in general as a principle. I would just be like, okay, careful with this one, she's still learning the ropes of walking with God. And that can be a great thing. I think sometimes new Christians are fantastic at getting Christians who've been Christians for a while out of ruts. Yes. And because they'll try things and it's just, whoa, I've never thought of doing it that way. And it, I guess spices up the faith almost in a sense. But I think in terms of if you're looking to settle down with someone and build a life, that would take a little bit more consideration.
That's true. I think the thing about serving, for me, I think it is the things that serving in church reflects.
Okay.
Faithfulness, commitment.
Absolutely.
So it is important. Capacity-wise, I could differ, but you make a good point. But it is important for the person to be serving in some capacity.
It's far more important about their heart. Like, as you say, I think the reason that capacity is important for me is it tells me something about their heart. And if that heart difference is there, that's going to be the problem, not the difference in serving. It's going to be the heart issue.
So when you are interested in a person, say you've seen someone you're interested in, do you think long term? Are you thinking, is this a marriage partner, or are you just thinking this person is nice to hang out with, this person it has a commitment towards God? What is your framework when you go into?
Are you referring to in the sense of dating this person? Am I going into that looking for marriage, or am I just looking for companionship?
Oh, companionship, yes.
Okay. My opinion on this one's quite strong. I think if you're going into dating with anything other than the perspective of looking to get married, you're kind of wasting your time.
Oh, wow.
Like, it's a strong opinion, I know. I think the purpose of dating is not just for companionship. You get companionship in other ways. You can have friendships, absolutely. You can build relationships with people that aren't looking for a romantic attachment. I think dating specifically is looking at, is this someone I could spend the rest of my life with in a marriage relationship? And I think you're actually, if you're looking to date someone but not actually, there's no chance of moving forward, you're actually more likely to hurt each other than anything else. So I would personally say, no, that's, for me, dating is for marriage and not really for it. Now, that's not to say everyone you date, like you might date and then realize this isn't going to work, and that's cool. That's the point of dating. But if you're just dating and not even bothering to think about it, then you're kind of just, there's no point to it, I don't think.
Got you. So that is a good segue into pressures, basically. So how do you navigate that then? If you're saying, when you go into a relationship, you're thinking, could this be the person that I spend the rest of my life with? How do you navigate? What are the stages that one would go through to get to the end goal?
Well, I mean, in general, you've kind of, you've got the singleness, which is, where we all start. For some of us, we progress on to the dating phase, and that's constantly looking at, could I spend the rest of my life with this person? And the kind of end of the dating phase, I would say, would be engagement. So you ask the question. So throughout the dating, I guess the stages are like, you're just constantly, I don't want to say evaluating because it sounds too methodical, but it's totally there's a Holy Spirit element to it, there's a heart element to it, but you are in general asking the question, could this work? And I think the hardest part of dating for me that I've found is maintaining the ability to say, this isn't working, okay, we're done. Because until you ask the question, there's, you haven't committed to each other, you haven't made the vow yet. So maintaining that level of emotional attachment, but not over attachment, like you're still brother and sister in Christ, you're nothing more than that.
Yes.
Until you ask the question, and even then you're not properly husband and wife until after the marriage day. So I think that the stages are, I think it'd be unique to each individual, but constantly, I guess, okay, great, we get along. Like after the first date, you're kind of just looking, do we get along? Do we enjoy spending time with one another? And then it starts to build into those deeper things that I'd mentioned, her character, what's her, are we both pursuing the same vision? And what's her, like, when you get really into it, what are her thoughts on kids? What are her thoughts on finances? What are, where is she, what life does she want to build? And will our lives work together?
So
does that answer the question?
It does answer the question, yeah. So it makes me wonder, do you feel pressure as a Christian guy asking girls out? Because if you're saying from the get-go, we are sort of answering these deeper questions. Do you feel pressure as a Christian guy asking girls out? Sometimes you just genuinely want to go for a coffee to see if, we get along, and then obviously there's this overarching theme of marriage in the end.
Well, I think it can, depending on how you handle yourself in it, you can over-pressurize yourself.
Okay.
So absolutely, we're building towards the end goal of marriage, which is a big thing. I'm not going to try and deny that, but you start off with the smaller things. You start off with the lower pressure things. So the first date is not a high pressure thing. It's a, hey, do we like spending time with each other? So I wouldn't say I feel pressure inside of, like, I wouldn't say pressure is there. It's a nerve-wracking thing. Like, you're nervous, because it's, you're making yourself vulnerable and asking that question. You're, hey, I like you. What do you think about the idea of us going on a date? Or would you like to go get coffee? Sorry?
Tell the person straight up, I like you. Let's.
Well, I think it would definitely depend on the person.
Okay.
Some people appreciate that upfrontness. For others, it's, hey, I would really like to see, you're a bit more gentle with it and lead into it. But I've watched the previous episodes of this. Every single girl that came on, all of them wanted clarity. They all wanted to know what's the intention from the off. And so I think that's important. So as much as some people prefer it blunt, and some people would rather it a little bit eased into, it still needs to be clear. But you still need to be at some point, no, I'd like us to go on a date to see where this is going. Or, and in asking that question, there's inevitably the possibility that you get rejected, and that's vulnerable and scary. So I think that's where the nerves come from. But I wouldn't say pressure. The pressure builds as you grow stronger in the relationship to handle the pressure, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Tell me about rejection. So obviously it's nerve-wracking to ask people out, ask people out. Have you ever had to deal with a case where you liked someone and the person said, I don't think me and you could ever be a thing?
I haven't had to deal with that scenario.
Oh, wow.
I've been very blessed in that regard. Yeah. Every time I've asked someone out, they've said yes.
Okay.
And yeah, so I haven't personally experienced that rejection. But the idea of it, like, you go into it, she's got the freedom to say no. If she doesn't have the freedom to say no, that's a very unhealthy relationship. So I think, even though I haven't experienced it, you always go in with that kind of, okay, she could say no, and I need to be okay with that.
Yeah. But another recurring thing from the previous interviews is the one about girls asking guys out. The guy before you, Yannick, said he wouldn't mind a girl coming up to him and saying, would you like to go out for coffee? In either way, whether she liked him or in that way, or even just as a friend. How do you feel about that? What if a girl came up to you and said, Stu, let's go for a coffee? I like you.
Okay, I was going to say, if she's clear about it, like, this is like, first of all, like, I mean, as I say, it would kind of depend on how she does it. If she's super clear about, this is what she's asking, I honestly, my first reaction would be flattered. Like, I would honestly, I'd be like, I do appreciate that. She values me enough to actually say, no, I'd like to see if this is going anywhere. I would also, and not as a pressure or it wouldn't be something I'd stress about or be worried about in the slightest, but in the back of my mind, I would think, okay, I would certainly feel that, okay, at some point I'm going to have to, in this, us getting to know one another, I'm going to have to step up and show I'm able to lead.
Okay.
Because she's taken the initiative on that first stage. And I personally think that part of a man's role in a relationship requires him to step up and lead. Okay. And if she's going to see the part of me that I want her to see, if I'm interested in continuing that relationship, I'm going to need to show her, no, I can actually do that at some point. And so if I'm asking her out, how I do that conveys a fair amount of information to her that I'm actually able to convey my intention with clarity, step up and make a decision, pick somewhere to go for the date. I'm able to do all of those things. But if she does that, I'm going to then need to pick another moment to show that actually I'm capable of that too.
Wow, so you're actually saying a lot here, Stuart, because what you're saying is the guy's making the first move, the guy's asking girls out, the guy's making the plans for the first date. That's actually a big show of leadership.
Yeah, I would say so. I think it's because it's all,
Yeah.
if we're talking about dating, be evaluating one another and whether or not you work, everything we're doing is kind of conveying information, and you get information from everything that your partner does.
Exactly.
So I think that's important to keep in the back of your mind.
Yeah. It's so good that you said that, because that's the only issue I have with girls asking guys out, because that is supposed to be a show of confidence and leadership about, future things. But like you're saying, it could be reversed where the person that does realize that, listen, at some point in the game, if we do go forward, I need to show that I'm capable of being the leader in this relationship.
If I want, I think there's something attractive about a guy that can lead. I wouldn't necessarily say a guy that can't lead is. I don't think that's an attractive quality in a guy. So if I want her to see the best of me, I'm going to have to realize at some point, yeah, no, absolutely, I'm going to need to show her how I'm capable of doing that.
But if you didn't want to go on a date with this girl said, Stuart, I like you, let's go on a coffee, and you didn't want to go, how are you navigating this?
I mean, obviously you want to be as kind as possible. And in the same way as she would, if I asked her, she would have the freedom to say no. Yeah. I would definitely feel like it's within my, I am okay saying, look, I really am flattered by your attention and your interest. I really, I don't feel like this is going to go anywhere just straight from the off. I'd rather not waste your time if that's what you're intending to pursue. You want to be as kind as possible with it. And it kind of, again, depends on the person. If this is someone who likes it straight to the point and has come up to me and been super direct and straight to the point, then I'd return that in kind. If it's someone who was a bit more nervous about the whole thing and, you could see she was just a little bit less confident in it, I would, you would tailor your response to that. But I would definitely feel, if I didn't feel it was right, I would tell her no.
Okay. Got you. The reason why I like asking that question is because I think there's beauty in vulnerability, and you could get knocked back, you could get what you want, but the point is that you need to be vulnerable. Like everyone.
Yeah, absolutely.
Vulnerable, and I've loved everyone's response towards that question, saying, "Well, no is not such a bad thing. It just means." You're not the one for me, but I appreciate that you were vulnerable. You did take a step. No one has ever said you should have asked, you should have checked, you should have done your homework, looked for clues. No, everyone says it's fine for you to come out.
Yeah.
For us. Yeah.
I think like it being such a vulnerable moment is why I think it's actually it's a personal moment. It's not something I would do in obviously you do it in a public place, but not with it. Like it would be a conversation between me and that person. Like I would rather there not be anyone else listening, because it is first of all, it's a vulnerable thing to get up and ask someone that. And then it's a vulnerable thing to give your answer, because you're opening your heart either way. And so I think that's a very personal moment. Exactly for the reason you described, it's vulnerable.
Got you. So why not just take the person out on a coffee then? And say at the coffee, listen, I don't think this is for us. My MO is, if someone asks you for coffee or for tea, you should always go just on a human level, just on a value type situation,
I think this is an interesting one. Depending on the person, I would agree.
Qualify that depending on the person. What does that mean?
Well, and also depending on where I'm at. So if I don't feel like I'm in a good state to begin a relationship, I feel like that's totally justified in saying, look, it's nothing to do with you. It's nothing to do with the fact I don't know. It's entirely to do with where I'm at just now and where I feel God's leading me, and I don't think this is the right moment for me. And I'm going to have to say no. If it's someone who, I think it's an interesting one, because we do treat each other as Christians like brothers and sisters, and there's some women in the church who I would genuinely consider a sister, and even the idea of going out on a date with them just seems a little bit cringe. It does seem a bit unusual.
Yeah.
Now, I would tend to, if it was someone where I wasn't sure, I might consider going out on that first date. But again, it does sometimes feel a little bit like I don't want to be stringing them along. Like I would want to be super upfront and clear with, and I don't know how to say, I'm not sure, without sounding a little bit unkind. So I think it's an interesting one. I would definitely rather have a clear-cut answer for, let's give this a go, or I really don't see it happening. just because that the entire way through that first date, they're kind of wondering, maybe I have a shot, and if it's really unlikely, I'd rather not put anyone through that.
That is something for me to consider. That's true. Good answers to you. Good answer. What are your current frustrations with the dating scene? This could be anything in the Christian side, in folk culture, anything at all. What are your current frustrations?
I think this is an interesting one. Partially because I wouldn't consider myself in the dating scene at all right now. Like I'm kind of just
dating since you. How do you mean?
Well, I haven't. I've been single for a year. I'm kind of avoiding that. Like I certainly feel like it's certainly where I am now. I'm doing a lot of growth personally that doesn't need to be complicated by the addition of a relationship. So I haven't been dating anyone.
So you've benched.
I mean, if that's a way of putting it, I guess. Yeah.
It's a beautiful thing to bench. Honestly, I'm not scared to figure things out. So let me bench myself. So
I think. Yeah, I feel like there's definitely, I'm in a place where God's wanting me to stay single for now, while we work on some stuff. And again, as I say, the right time will come when it happens. In terms of things that frustrate me about the dating scene, I think seeing anyone who is like my harsh answer about dating without the intention of marriage, I think that's a frustration for me. I like it because to me, it just speaks of carelessness, in a sense, carelessness with the emotions of the person you're dating. When, they could be expecting marriage and you're just not even thinking about it. It's a harsh thing. I think this is an interesting one I don't get frustrated about the way the world dates, because they have so completely different values from me that it feels like it's a strange thing to try and impose what I believe on how they're handling themselves. Obviously, I disagree with a lot of the modern day assumptions about dating, but they don't have a framework for anything different. And I would feel much more frustrated at a Christian who's ignoring some of the wisdoms of like the word or of the Bible, or, ignoring wise counsel from other people who are just trying to help them. That would frustrate me.
So what does that look like? Does that look like people like dating for 6 or 7 years? Does that look like people jumping from person to person?
It definitely looks like people jumping from person to person. I think this
is hard though, Stuart. Think about it. How do you find someone if you don't, not jump, but if you don't ask or...
No, absolutely. I think the jumping from...
Sorry for Christian people in this regard, in that there is a standard, but there is also a reality. Does that make sense? There's a framework, but there's also a reality. How do we meet people if we don't ask people out? If we ask people out and they're not the one, then we need to ask someone else out and it looks like we're jumping.
I would be less concerned if it was, you went out on a first date with a couple of people. My concern would be, they go from one 6-month relationship to another 6-month relationship to another 6-month relationship, and it's a pattern. And you're like, right, you're either you've got something you're not dealing with, and you get to this certain stage of the relationship and you're gone, or you're not actually interested in a long-term relationship with any of these girls. You're just looking for something. So I think that's something to be aware of. I wouldn't necessarily say the long, like a 6-year dating is as big a problem.
What?
Now here's why. Because I've seen relationships happen like that work.
Okay.
People who've like dated for years and years and years, and they've kept themselves and they've followed.
Okay.
I mean, as much as we all make mistakes, they've to a degree lived it in a Christian way, and then they've gotten married. I'm not sure I'd do that personally, because 6 years is a long time. Okay. But I wouldn't necessarily have as much of an issue with that as I would have with someone who's just, repeating the same mistakes over and over and over and over again. Because that to me suggests an immaturity and that they're not actually ready to step into a relationship. And I think that's hugely important as well.
I think what also matters is the people you have around you. Who do you get your dating advice from? Who helps you figure these things? Some people are out there without a team,
Yeah.
So
I think this is an interesting question, because my best friends, the guys that I get a lot of advice from, and I go to with questions and prayers, and that I chat to about a lot of this really deep stuff, are both, they're married and they've got kids, and so they have been through this process before, wildly different experiences to me, but they're both hugely godly men, and I think that's what I value in it more than the experiences that they've had, or the fact that they're in a different stage from me. The fact that they're slightly more advanced definitely helps, because it means I'm seeing in their marriages the kind of things that come up, the things that you deal with, the things that you look for, the possible hurdles to overcome. But definitely the fact that they're both hugely godly men is a massive thing. So for anyone who's maybe looking for who do I get around me to support me, I think someone who knows the word and who lives the word is that's a hugely important factor. Now, I've definitely got friends around who are similar stage to me, and we're kind of all in that place together and encouraging the growth in one another. But particularly when we're talking about like relationship advice, for want of a better word, I think the guys who are a bit more mature than me are the guys that I can learn from, and so talking with them are a lot more valuable than those of us who don't know yet.
Yeah. So it is important. It's important to have a team around you to speak about these things with, because you could be in a cycle and not even know it.
Yeah. And I think that, again, there needs to be a level of vulnerability and honesty with the people who are around you, because they need to be able to step in and say, right, look, you're doing this again, snap out of it, or look, let's help you out of this. They need to be able to give you the straight talk, which I think is valuable in not just dating and singleness, but any area. If you're regularly doing something that's a mistake, I want friends that are able to call me out on it.
I tell you, this is not the way. People go through the stages of talking to someone, and then you talk to someone, then you decide you're a thing. Then if you decide you're a thing, you become a couple. So there's all these little now nuances in dating. Someone could be seeing someone and not actually be seeing someone. Does that make sense?
This is the
other generation, especially millennials, which you are. What are you, millennial or Gen Z?
Yeah, I think I'm just a millennial.
So okay, you may not then have. I think younger millennials do have this as well. So there's all these little.
Yeah, no, it was definitely like, I certainly remember talking to a guy about this in school, and he was saying that there was a difference between dating someone and going out with someone, and to me, I just saw them as exactly the same thing. I'm like, what on earth are you talking about? And the basic distinction that he made was you can date several people, but if you're going out with someone, that's the only person you're going out with. And to me, I found then, and I still find now, there's a bit of I don't like that. And the reason being, if you're dating someone and not from the offset showing, right, I'm serious about this, or I can, almost prove, like, if I'm going out with, if I'm romantically attached to you, I'm only romantically attached to you. I feel like it's sending the wrong message. But you're kind of right. There are kind of different, I guess, stages, but we need to be. I think the hardest thing is, as you say, you start talking and there's very little pressure, but as you build that relationship, the emotional attachment grows, and I think that's natural. But we've got to be so careful that we at no point start put too much weight on it, like too much emotional weight on it, and we start treating them like a fiance when they're still only a girlfriend, or like a wife when they're still only like you're still just dating. So I think we put so much pressure on the not having sex before marriage, and don't actually talk about the emotional. You can get emotionally over attached to the person you're dating before it's time. Like, that's something that you should be saved for, I would say, marriage. But you're right, like, there is elements of you're constantly looking to, as you progress through that relationship, you're constantly looking to maybe deepen it, strengthen it. But you need to be, I think we as Christians can be sometimes a bit careless about how we do that. And I've done it myself, and that's the reason I'm saying it. So
what I'm hearing you saying about navigating that sort of nuance is, if you're intentional about the thing from the get-go, you can avoid these little, if you're forward about what we are in a specific phase, you can avoid these little gray areas.
Yeah, and also I think, we're all human, we make mistakes, and so I think having wise couples outside of you who can then speak in and say, look, I think you guys are doing this and it's a bit unhealthy, or it's the wrong moment for it, so having those godly people who can speak into it, I think is also important.
Give us some closing advice for people who are single. They're going to be in the dating scene, they could be benched like you. What is your advice for singles?
Ooh, this is a good question. I would say absolutely get yourself in a really good place with God, and emotionally as well. Your spouse, your girlfriend, whatever, is not going to be what makes you feel whole if you don't already feel whole going into it. And you're far better off, making sure that you're ready and then taking the step when it's time. Don't feel the need to rush it. It's okay. You've got time. Almost certainly you've got time. And God's got an incredible plan for you, and don't ever forget that, number one above everything else.
Amen.